Hi there, sorry we're running late, but we did our best within our control, so we're going to just get started in a second here. I'm Greg. Thank you all very much for coming. You all set?
Yeah, I would just love some water.
There you go. Oh, yeah. See that? You're ready? Exactly. Okay. How's everybody doing tonight?
Great.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So, welcome. I am Greg Epstein. I work as the Humanist Chaplain at Harvard University and the director of the Humanist Hub and the Humanist Community at Harvard. We are sponsoring this event. The Humanist Hub, which is located at 30 JFK Street in Harvard Square. And normally we would have this event there, but just too many of you to do so. The Humanist Hub is a place where you can connect with other people, you can act to make the world better, and you can evolve as a human being. We are a center for humanist life, a non-religious community committed to the power of connection to help us do good and live well. We use reason and dialogue to determine our highest ethical values, and we act on those values with love and compassion. We help one another evolve as individuals as we work to improve our world. So we were founded in 1974 as the Humanist Community at Harvard. We were a small organization serving humanists, atheists, agnostics, and the non-religious around the university for over 30 years, but in recent years we've evolved into a hub for secular community building programs in Greater Boston and beyond. So that's perhaps how you found your way to us, and we thank you for being here. About our guest today, Sam Harris. Sam, you have been among the most influential writers in the country over these past several years on any topic, really, but especially on this topic of atheism, secularism, and humanism. You are incredibly influential. You're also a great writer, an eloquent speaker, and certainly a passionate advocate for the ideas you hold dear. You are not afraid of controversy if it involves your sincere beliefs.
I'm increasingly afraid of controversy.
Nor would I imagine that you're the slightest bit intimidated by the fact that I, your host, may disagree with you on a few issues.
I'm a slow learner.
You are able to act in such a way, to think in such a way, to provoke intense intellectual discussion, even within the rarefied and, I suppose some would say, thin air of pop culture. Just this past week, you've had Ben Affleck, Reza Aslan, Bill Maher, and others enmeshed in debate, and we will come to that. We will have a chance to address some of the issues that I'm sure some people in the audience would like to discuss. But first, we're going to spend significant time on your really significant new book, Waking Up. This is an important book. It comes at what I think is an important time for a book like this. It's something that you've been working on for many years. And interestingly enough, you and I also share the same publisher, and at one point we shared the same editor for this book and my next book, but you got your editor in the middle of your publishing, and actually he's now moved on to Harvard University Press, so we no longer have the same editor, but we did. And I've been really interested to see this project as it's been getting ready to emerge. So our topics, spirituality without religion and community without religion, that's the subject of my next book, are strongly linked to one another, I think. And so there's a lot to discuss, and let's get into it, shall we?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so I thought it was appropriate to start with a softball because although I do disagree with you on several key areas, I'm going to start with what I think is a really central point you make towards the beginning of the book that I found to be spot on and genuinely important. And that is on page 10 of the book, you write, a rational approach to spirituality seems to be what's missing most in secularism and from the lives of most of the people I meet. So if you could start by just defining spirituality from your perspective, just for those who haven't had a chance to look at the book yet, and then talk about that statement in particular.
Yeah, well, the center of the bullseye for me is this phenomenon of self-transcendence, the fact that it's possible to have an experience of consciousness free of the sense that you are a subject riding around inside your head as a kind of passenger in the body, perceiving everything from a seeming point behind your eyes, and feeling that you are an experiencer in the middle of your experience, a thinker in addition to the flow of thoughts, an author of your thoughts and actions at every moment. And that point of view, which is the point of view everyone starts with, doesn't actually survive scrutiny. And spirituality is a way of scrutinizing this through techniques like meditation or psychedelics or getting hit on the head. Something can perturb your life in such a way that you can recognize that consciousness doesn't actually feel like a self. This thing you call I is what it feels like to be thinking without knowing that you're thinking. That's not to say that people don't exist. To say that self doesn't exist or that it's an illusion is not to say that people don't exist. I'm really here right now. It's fine to talk about me as a discrete person in the world. But the feeling of being up here in your head as a passenger, as a kind of a unitary subject that's carried over from one moment to the next, unchanging, that doesn't survive scrutiny. So there are many other types of spiritual experiences. You can have an experience of ecstasy or rapture or unconditional love, and those are all interesting, and I touch on some of them in the book. But the center for me is this cutting through the illusion of the self.
So talk a little bit then about this idea that what's missing most in secularism is this idea, and what's missing most in the lives of the people that you meet.
Well, so this one of the consequences of meditation and a disposition to inquire into the nature of yourself in a rigorous way is that you become increasingly sensitive to the fact that you are seeking happiness in every moment, and it's your search for happiness that is causing you to overlook some features of consciousness in the present moment that could otherwise make you happy. So that we have this sense that our happiness is contingent upon good things happening in the future, or getting rid of bad things in the future. And spirituality is a different game that you might play, or a recognition of the game that you are in fact playing that is done uninspected. The game we're all playing is that we all have a long list of things we want to do in our lives, changes we want to make, relationships we want to have or end, career milestones we want to reach. And the illusion is if each one of those things on the list seems to promise that we will have a good enough reason to just be satisfied now in the present moment. So if I only did that thing better, then I would just be able to relax and be happy now. If I only got the new job, if I only get that grade, if I only whatever. And that is, those goals, it's a mirage because it continually recedes. It's not to say that good things happening aren't good. There are ordinary forms of happiness we can extract from these transitory pleasures and these successes. But spirituality is about recognizing that there's an intrinsic property of consciousness that can be a basis of well-being, and you can be happy before anything happens. You can be happy actually in the midst of otherwise unpleasant experience. And that, having that game going on the hard drive is something that secularism really hasn't equipped us for. It's not, there's not a clear secular, just the fact that I'm continually embarrassed to be using the term spirituality proves that there's not a good secular language for this project.
What about the east-west part of this? Our student group, the Harvard Community of Humanist, Atheist, and Agnostics, or HUCHAT, you guys out there? How you doing? They have stickers and t-shirts that say, got soul? Yeah, me neither. And this strikes me as a point that's after your heart, or that they, for having chosen that slogan, would like a lot of what you have to say in this book. This concept of Eastern wisdom, I think what you're arguing is it's more compatible with that concept of soullessness. And you actually even talk about, or maybe hint at, the idea that the Western concept of the soul may be hindering some of our spiritual pursuits.
Yeah, I think...
Sam, could you check your microphone, please? I don't know if it's on.
Oh, I just...
No, it's on, but yeah, maybe...
Okay, maybe when I turn my head,
That's good.
There we go.
well, look left. If I look right, then you won't hear. Okay, well, can you hear me? No?
Can we,
Can
can we
dial
get
up, or-
Sam's level
Sorry.
pumped up?
I
Yeah.
can hold this.
All right. I'll try to lower mine. That's probably the issue. All right. Because you can't balance these two levels. All right. I'll see what I can do.
Okay, so I don't know if that improved anything. So there is an invidious comparison between East and West in my thinking about this. There's just no way to elide that fact. It's just, I think that wisdom of various forms has not been equally dispersed through human culture, and so the analogy I make is to medicine and to an understanding of biology and human health. That is mostly a Western phenomenon. I mean, what we mean by medicine, when you've got cancer or diabetes or whatever, what we mean by medicine is Western medicine. Now, it's not to say that there aren't certain Eastern remedies that may work, but if they work because they are conforming by happenstance or by some other theory to the principles of biology as we've come to know them in the West. So medical knowledge is really Western, and in the East, it's not so much. It's folklore, it's accident, it's good luck, but the theories of Ayurveda and Tibetan medicine, as far as I can tell, are completely bogus. But as I say in the book, the arrow of embarrassment points the other way when you're talking about introspection and a very systematic methodology for exploring the landscape of your own consciousness through techniques like meditation. What we have in the West are traditions of very much framed by the Abrahamic tradition of just believing in a God who you are in relationship to. Again, it's not to say that there aren't monastics in Christian and Jewish and Muslim who haven't had enormously interesting experiences. They have, and many of them wind up sounding like Buddhists when you push them. Somebody like Meister Eckhart is celebrated among mystics as somebody who, in half his mood, sounded like he was a Buddhist, but he also sounded like someone who was going to get burned alive by the Inquisition, as he probably was, but he was lucky to die before that. So I think the religions of the West have not been good for our inquiry into the nature of the mind in a first-person sense.
All right, so you talk quite a bit. You spend a lot of time in the book, in your chapters on the mystery of consciousness and the riddle of the self, on sort of deconstructing this idea of the self. And actually, rather than spending a lot of time on that, I want to flag that that's something that you do, and I think you may get questions on that, or questions that will allow you to spend some time on that. But I want to get right into the focus on meditation. Because really meditation is a significant act that to me animates so much of the book. You know, This is an experience that you've been having, a concrete thing that you've been doing for well over 20 years, right? And in fact, you know, you've had, among other people, influence on our community. Certainly, not just you. There's a lot of people out there doing great work in meditation, but we, as a humanist community, we do a mindfulness-based stress reduction class every Monday. We have a meditation group that meets every Tuesday. That's meeting here tonight instead of its normal meeting at the Humanist Hub. And it's important to us as well. And so you write in chapter 4 that there are good reasons to believe that adopting a practice like meditation can lead to positive changes in one's life, and you write a lot about that. By the way, have you been leading groups like this in a meditation exercise? Is that something that you've been doing since the book came out?
No. Well, yeah, I can do that for a few minutes, and yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Is that something that you feel works better towards the beginning of a meeting?
No, well, I think it's good toward the beginning, because then we can know that everyone knows what we're talking about.
You want to do it? Shall we? Okay. All right. Sam Harris leading us in meditation.
So you might just want to sit up a little straighter than you were a moment ago. And get comfortable. And you can close your eyes if you want. It's not necessary, but most people like that. And just feel the weight of your body settling into your seat. Just feel the points of contact between your body and the chair. The pressure, the warmth, vibration. And then gradually become aware of the sensation of breathing, either the tip of the nose or the rising and falling of your abdomen. It doesn't matter if your breath is shallow or deep. This is not a breathing exercise. It's an exercise of attention. So just let it come as it comes. And see if you can feel the next inhalation from the moment it arises. And cover it with your attention. As you pay attention to the sensation of breathing and other sensations in your body, you'll also notice that you hear sounds. Just let your mind be wide open to all these sensations. And the moment you notice you're lost in thought, just bring your attention back to the sensation of breathing, or to other feelings in your body, or to the next sound that you notice. See if you can notice the next sound as it hinges on your hearing. See if you can notice the next thought, the moment it arises in consciousness. and noticing it, watch what happens to the thought. Where does it go? Now you can open your eyes, and assuming they were closed, and most people feel when they open their eyes that there's a big shift. That you were inside a moment ago, and now your eyes are open, and this is outside. But what you see with your open eyes is just as much inside of you as everything else you were just paying attention to. This is, as a matter of neurology, this is all being run on your brain. And as a matter of conscious experience, this is just as much an appearance of consciousness as the sounds and the sensations of your body a moment ago. So there's not this sense of going from inside to outside is a bit of an illusion. It's a concept. This is the same place where you were feeling and thinking a moment ago. And one way to observe that is you can just picture something on the floor in front of us. Picture a bonfire. Picture flames about 3 feet high. Now, depending on how good you are at visualizing things, you can get just a little dim flash or something, or there are people who have great powers of visualization. They can actually put a bonfire right here. But something appears. It's different when you try to focus on a bonfire here. It's different than you're focusing on a giant tomato. Right? So so something changes. So this is the place where your mental imagery appears. Is also, in some sense, the place where your real visual field appears. And when you close your eyes and you're staring into the darkness of your closed eyes, your visual field is there just as much as it is with your eyes open. And that space of darkness behind your eyelids can open up, with various degrees of concentration. That becomes a domain of lots of visual imagery, and that can be very interesting. So I'm just now, the meditation is technically over, but I'm just trying to play at the boundaries of your concept about where meditation ends and where the rest of your life begins.
I wonder if you could say a little bit about how this practice has affected you personally in your personal experience. When I read the parts of the book that are narrative about your early experiences with doing this and the other writings that you've had on this, you cover a lot of these topics even in The End of Faith, your first book. In actually some real depth. I mean, you certainly expand on it here, but you've been thinking about this for a very long time. I'm struck by the image of what was it? Was it a 19-year-old Sam that was first in Tibet, or not in Tibet, in Nepal, that's right. And you're there really just expending a tremendous amount of energy seeking out truth, seeking out what I imagine, we would have hoped would be authentic experience, authentic teaching. You've stayed with this with such constancy over a long period of time, and your wife is also very devoted to these ideas, teaches them to children, including your own. Talk a little bit about what has been so powerful for you as a person that has led you to devote so much time and energy to this.
There are really two doors in to this. There's probably more, but there are two that are obvious to me. One is just intellectual interest, just wanting to know what's true about the nature of one's own mind. And the other, which is totally compatible with that and may, in fact, certainly supports that, is just wanting to mitigate one's own psychological suffering. And those are two distinct, the intellectual part of this doesn't motivate some people, but the suffering part of it tends to motivate everyone in the end. And the more sensitive you become to why it is you're unhappy in any moment, you keep finding that it's this automaticity of being lost in thoughts, most of which are not well designed to make you happy all day long. Maybe some of you are not like me, and you just think happy and interesting thoughts all day. But most of what we say to ourselves is not conducing to lives of joy and equanimity. And so, yeah, it's almost like, I mean, until you see the difference between being lost in thoughts and being mindful or being aware of thoughts as just appearances in consciousness, then you're helplessly lost in thought, and you're a hostage of whatever your thoughts are. The next thought of judgment, self-judgment, or anxiety, or judgment of others, whatever it is you. It seems to be you each moment, and it just trims your consciousness down to whatever emotional punchline it contains. And but once you see an alternative, once you know what it's like to see a thought of self-hatred or fear or whatever it is just arise and pass away in consciousness, then all those moments when you are lost in thought and beginning to suffer, it's almost like you notice you're uncomfortable and you look down and you see your hand just pinching yourself, and then you stop it. And then life goes on for a few more moments and you start to feel uncomfortable again, and then you look down and you see your hand is doing that again. And then you stop it. And it's analogous to what we do with our minds. But until you find your hand and find a way to stop it, you're just uncomfortable. And that's, so it is very much about mitigating suffering in the end.
Sam Rosen, could you bring me a pen? Thank you. So the line that I was reading, the deepest goal of spirituality is, the line that I was reading, there are good reasons to believe adopting a meditation practice can lead to positive changes. You continue with that into the deepest goal of spirituality is freedom from the illusion of self. And you go on there to describe this possible paradox between valuing freedom and seeking it. But I wanted to really spend a minute on this line. The deepest goal of spirituality is freedom from the illusion of the self. And I want to hear how you came to the judgment that that is, in fact, the deepest goal of spirituality. Because I'm really not sure I agree. And I think that this may be an important piece to discuss. So you want to just say a little bit about just that very simple statement?
Yeah. Well, it really is two sides of the same coin. One, the illusion of the self is born of being lost in thought and not feeling like a thinker of thoughts, feeling not seeing thoughts as thoughts, but just the next thought arises and it feels like you. So whether you emphasize the illusoriness of the self or you emphasize breaking the spell of being distracted by thought, it's a matter of taste. But well, actually not so much a matter of taste, but it's possible to be free of thought. This is kind of an esoteric problem, but it's possible to be free of obvious thoughts and still feel like a subject. And there are types of meditation, for instance, which are concentration practices where the goal is to pay such close attention to an object or to a state of mind, like a loving kindness practice where you're generating a feeling of loving kindness for all sentient beings, is the Buddhist practice. And the goal is just to have your mind flooded with that feeling of loving kindness to the exclusion of everything else. And it's possible with the requisite concentration to have a mind where thoughts are no longer arising. You're no longer, the voice in your head is silenced for a time. And it's incredibly pleasant to experience that. But there is still a subtle undercurrent of a mental structure, which is the subject-object dichotomy. You still feel like you are here paying attention to something, and so undermining that is still the foundation of what I'm calling spirituality. It is the foundation because it's actually it's there to be recognized about the nature of consciousness. It's a property of consciousness, and it's the thing that doesn't go away when you're really paying attention. And it's the thing that it's. There's a classic example from the Indian tradition of a coiled rope being mistaken for a snake. So you look in the corner of a room and you think you see a snake there, and you get this full fear reaction, and then you look more closely and you see that it's just a rope. Now, a skeptic might wonder, why, how do you know that the rope is real and the snake is the illusion? Well, because it always collapses in one direction. You never look more closely at the rope and discover that it's really a snake. It's always a matter of paying close attention and noticing the thing that the illusion receiving. And so that's, at a certain stage in meditation practice, that's what begins to happen with this feeling of self. It's just not stable anymore. It's just, you couldn't have it if you wanted it. It's the thing, so it really is, it's not really so much a matter of personal preference or anything else. It's just, if you've looked at it closely enough, and discovered its absence, you couldn't decide to feel like a self. I mean, it's like deciding to be distracted. It's like the moment you know what mindfulness is, if someone says to you, okay, be distracted right now, be lost in thought right now, you can't do it. That's synonymous with saying be mindful, pay close attention. Now, of course, if you don't know what mindfulness is, if you've never meditated, and someone says be distracted, well, it's easy to do because you're just going to be distracted. So the thing that is there when you are forced, for whatever reason, to pay close attention is the thing that you have to rely on. And
so this is certainly a part of our experience that is fundamental to us. But I think another piece of our experience that's really fundamental that I don't see you necessarily spending a lot of time here, and I found myself asking why, is our human relationships. I mean, the other thing that really doesn't go away in life is the fact that we are here on this earth in a social context, that we have human relationships that without which we would not be able to exist throughout every stage of our life, certainly from our earliest days. And just like there is sort of there's a wide range of experiences that we can have inwardly. There's a real wide range of qualities that our human interactions can have. And you do talk about how training in meditation has been shown to increase empathy and awareness of others' emotions, but it's sort of an indirect approach that you take there. And it reminded me, I'll just say another thing about it, and then I'll turn to you for your response. But the psychiatrist George Vaillant, who was the lead author on one of the largest longitudinal studies of human well-being in history, was a study of Harvard students from the 1920s on, 75-year study. And he put it succinctly, and I wanted something succinct, so I chose this. He said, the 75 years and $20 million expended on this grant study, 75-year longitudinal study, points to a straightforward 5-word conclusion. Happiness is love. Full stop. And I wonder how that resonates for you, and if that feels somehow like a different approach, like your approach. I mean, where does the quality of human relationship and loving human relationship come into this meditative practice?
Well, that was definitely my entry point to this whole inquiry. So as the book starts with an MDMA experience, an ecstasy experience, and that was feeling more love than I'd ever felt in my life was the breakthrough for me, which proved that it was possible to have a much better life and be a much better person than I was tending to realize in each moment. And so, there's certainly something. Love is incredibly important, and relationships are important, and community is important. And there are many things that are important in life that I don't cover in the book, although I cover the experience of unconditional love a little bit.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at, though, is that you don't really come back to that. You start with that experience that when you were 16 on I think, page 3 of the book.
Right.
And it's this very intimate description of your connection with your 16-year-old friend as you have this experience of taking a drug with him and realizing who he is. But for me, I wanted to hear the adult version of you come back to that and talk about what this could be like for you and for us in our lives today, because the point that stuck out to me is if our spiritual practices, if our meditative practices are not dramatically enhancing the quality of our human relationships and not just our inner experience, then I wonder if they're really filling the kind of central role that we would want a secular spirituality to fill in our lives.
No, I would totally agree with that. But I think there is something more fundamental than love. That love is necessary. It's one of the best things you can have appear in consciousness, and it is the foundation of any important relationship. But the reality is that you're going to lose everyone you love, and there are many moments in life where they're not there in the room. What you have is consciousness first. And if your well-being is predicated, or seems to be predicated, on always having the people you love near you and healthy, you are vulnerable. You are as vulnerable as you can possibly be in this life. Now, I'm not holding up as some value a being totally invulnerable to grief and bereavement and everything else that is surely coming and has come for many of us. But the reality is that we are alone in some fundamental sense, even though we are with others.
I wonder if that's really true, though, that we start with consciousness, because in fact, the beginning of our experience as a human being really is in being nurtured by other human beings. I mean, we wouldn't get to the point where we have any kind of even pre-adult consciousness if we hadn't been lovingly cared for.
Well, there's no question that others build your relationship to others builds your mind, and builds there's a genetic component to it as well. But yeah, you get tuned up as a person in dialogue with others and being cared for by others or being abused by others, and so relationships are the principal source of happiness or unhappiness for virtually everyone. But it still is a fact that you can go into a room for 3 months and not see anyone and be deeply fulfilled, deeply happy. And the fact that seems impossible to so many of us is a problem. The fact that, it's amazing, I read about this in the book, it's amazing that solitary confinement is considered a punishment, the worst punishment, inside a maximum security prison. So that even when forced to live among murderers and rapists, most people still prefer to be with whatever murderer or rapist looks the least scary than to be alone in a room. And so that is now it's not an accident that we're that way. We're deeply social, and you can say that that's normative in some way, but it is a kind of superpower to realize that you can be happy just by recognizing certain things about the nature of your own consciousness. And then when you are much better in relationship from that place, because then you're not constantly blaming the other person for not making you happy. I mean, so many of our relationships are transactional, where we are trying to get this other person to function as the prop in our lives that we think is going to make us happy, and we're blaming them for our own mental states. But part of spirituality is taking a kind of radical responsibility for your own unhappiness. So, how much time, to segue to that topic you raised at the beginning, how much time was I going to spend blaming Ben Affleck for the way I was feeling in the presence of Ben Affleck? But for an ability to meditate, it would be quite a long while.
speaking of transactional relationships, before we get to Ben, one more before we get to Ben. You write in the final chapter of the book, where you cover gurus and a number of other aspects of the meditative and spiritual life, you write, once again, I believe that too much can be made of the failings of specific spiritual teachers, or the pathologies found among their followers, as though such pratfalls discredit the guru-disciple relationship in principle. And you then draw an analogy to marriage, but I was struck by this because this comes after you catalog some really horrific examples that, and you yourself eloquently describe them, of Buddhist and other spiritual teachers who do just awful, despicable, unethical, and I would add bizarre things. Hogyam Trungpa and his student Osel Tenzin, who used his influence to have sex with his students and knowingly infect them with HIV. And Gurdjieff, what's that?
Trungpa did not do that.
That's all.
No, Trungpa didn't do that. But
Yes, his student Tenzin. Yeah. Trungpa, by the way, was not a figure without personal problems. And you catalog some of those in your book as well. And this has fascinated me for a long time. I grew up with his book sort of a prominent place in my family's household, my family's home. Yeah, I tend to agree with you about some of the portrayals that you give us of some of these figures as transactional, to say the least. The thing about this is that I feel if you were, I'm concerned that if you were equally, let's call it forgiving, of all liberal religions, I would see this in a different light, but famously, you're not. And I wonder, how concerned are you about the idea of giving Eastern religion a free pass?
Well, it's not Eastern religion that I'm forgiving of. I'm forgiving of people, and I'm forgiving of religious people in any tradition. So it's a different level of focus. I'm talking about, in my criticism of Western religion, there are doctrines that I find obviously false and obviously harmful. And so I'm critical of those doctrines, but I totally understand why any one person can be attached to those doctrines, consoled by those doctrines, etc.
You're also saying that some doctrines produce certain results more, with greater likelihood than others.
Yeah, well, if your doctrine is the self really exists and there's nothing you can do to change it, that is probably not the best heuristic for inquiring into the illusory nature of the self. So there are certain teachings that give you a map that I think is very accurate, and some of them are that you really have to find the part of the map that's accurate and get past all of the garish illustrations. But there are clear instructions, and then there are instructions that are more or less muddled with concepts that are misleading. And but your point about gurus, my point there was a simple one, just that there are I've met great meditation masters who seem to be everything I would want in a meditation master. People who had spent decades in caves or on retreat, and just were luminous people to be with, and correcting for all of my projection and just wish fulfillment. These were remarkably compassionate, loving, insightful people. But they also had personal failings, and they were prisoners of their own culture to some degree. They were not brilliant scientists by virtue of the fact that they were brilliant meditators. So I've met some teachers who are precisely the teachers you would want to meet, about whom there aren't disturbing stories to tell. But what I said in that section you referred to is that there are other teachers who, and some of them quite famous, who had a lot of genuine wisdom to share. These were very smart, very experienced people who gave, if you read their books, or like Trungpa is one of them. Trungpa has written when he spoke and had transcribed some brilliant teachings. He was a brilliant man, and he had a lot of experience, and but yeah, he had a lot of flaws. And
what flaws did he have?
Well, he was an alcoholic, and he was very aggressive. You should read the book, but he treated students in a way that seems quite unethical, both on the surface and on the ultimate result of his behavior. So it was
Don't agree.
okay. Well, then just read the book, and then you'll either not agree or not. But I mean, this is the.
By the way, you did not exhaustively catalog the stories about
there are many other Trumka stories.
Um,
But the rub here is that since the game, so when you're in dialogue with a teacher of this sort, and the game is to nullify your egocentricity, any sort of abuse or provocation directed your way can be spun as just a mirror held up to your egocentricity. So it's, the guru calls you in front of the room and says, take your clothes off, and you don't want to. You don't want to stand naked in front of all of these strangers or all of these friends or your family or whatever. And the guru says, well, why wouldn't you want to be naked in front of your mom and your dad and the mayor and whoever else is in the room? It's your own self-absorption that is resisting this. If you were free, you would just take your clothes off and you'd be as happy as a Buddha. Well, the problem is that's actually true, right? I mean, it's true that the goal is to be so free that it wouldn't matter that you could take your clothes off in front of anyone. It's just a concept. But it's almost certainly true that the guru who's playing that game with you is, to some degree, a self-absorbed egomaniac who is manipulating you for his own sadistic pleasure. And so there's a tension there, because it can always be spun as, this is for your benefit, I'm just showing you your own narcissistic illusions. And there are people who have an experience with good or bad gurus of breaking through their own inhibitions, being treated that way. And Trungpa, there's no doubt there are students of Trungpa's who came away from these weird collisions with him feeling like they had been benefited, but there are many, many people who clearly weren't, who were casualties of the problem.
And I appreciated your willingness to critique some of the individuals within some of the traditions that you value, and you also you do give what I would judge to be appropriate caveats in some of your public statements about some of these things. One of the things that you don't, I haven't seen you use as a caveat that I think is relevant, I'm sure you're aware of it, but the use of Zen techniques in training kamikaze pilots, for example. And
well, so I talked about that, I think, in The End of Faith.
Yeah.
That's just, it's a different context, but it's not that it's possible to spin certain forms of Buddhism into a basis for violence. That's not, Buddhism is not.
yeah, but and that's very interesting, because if I were to place that statement in parallel to, and I use kamikaze pilots because this was a really serious threat to Western civilization. Yeah. This was a grave, grave danger. This was as part of a war that endangered the lives of and really ended the lives of millions and millions of people. And so when you place that statement in parallel with some of your statements about Islam today, it just seems to me that there's a discrepancy there. And
no, I've discussed it. It's not. I've recommended for years. I've recommended that people read there's two books: Zen War Stories and Zen at War. If you want to see the connection between Zen and the kamikaze pilots. Now, the truth is, it was never pure Zen. It was Zen mixed with Shinto, mixed with a Japanese kind of nationalism and war ethic. So it was a weird brew, but it was not at all a surprise that certain Zen teachings, which do not emphasize compassion to the degree that most Buddhist teachings do, could be spun into this sort of martial ethic. And so, but to give a more relevant and current example, you look, and this trips off the tongue of every Muslim apologist at this moment. These crazy monks in Burma who are running around killing Muslims or advocating for killing the Muslims. I forgot the main monk's name, but so he is being held up as a Buddhist bin Laden, right? Now, it's true that he's an abhorrent character, and what they're doing is abhorrent, but it basically has no connection to the doctrine of Buddhism. This is just pure tribal violence carried out by Buddhist monks. Now, and to my knowledge, there is no, because I'm very well versed in the teachings of Buddhism, I would be amazed if he could string together a paragraph of justification for this behavior. But, and that is different. There's no doctrine of jihad in Buddhism. There's no statement that you should kill apostates and blasphemers in Buddhism. And so it is different to say that this is Buddhist, that Buddhism is the source of this violence. It's just not. These are people being violent. Now that said, it's possible to have, Hinduism can definitely be a source of violence. Hinduism is part of the
Hindu extremists that killed Gandhi, for example. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Bhagavad Gita contains a lot of violence in it. You, on Bill Maher's show, you said there are hundreds of millions of Muslims who are nominal Muslims, who don't take the faith seriously, who don't want to kill apostates, who are horrified by ISIS, and we need to defend these people, prop them up, and let them reform their faith.
Yes. There's one unfortunate word choice there where I misspoke. I just blogged about this just an hour before coming on stage here. So if you haven't seen that, but I misspoke there and I said faith. They don't take their faith seriously, which seemed to suggest that I was saying there were hundreds of millions of nominal Muslim atheists, and that only atheist Muslims could reform the faith, or only people who had lost their faith could reform Islam.
What about the idea that
that's not what I meant to say.
A Muslim who is working for peace, a Muslim who is working for sustainability, a Muslim who is working for justice,
there's no question
can't be a Muslim who takes his or her faith very seriously?
So he could not, I didn't mean to say faith there, I meant to say these doctrines of the sort I have been referring to in previous sentences. So you cannot take death for apostasy seriously and be working for peace. You cannot take jihad as the best thing you can possibly do with your life and martyrdom is the only direct way to paradise seriously and be working for peace. You can't take, as majorities in many Muslim countries do, the idea that adulterers should be stoned to death, or that this list gets more and more boring every time I trot it out. But in addition,
it's not boring because they're killing people.
Yes, okay, but I mean, one begins to wonder how often you have to repeat these ugly facts and without looking boorish.
How do you feel given that there are these millions of, well, let's call them moderate Muslims, you've given various statistics, and I won't contest the statistics here about percentages who do support this or that. Right. But I just wanted to ask, as my final question, we'll turn it over to some folks in the audience and then the general audience. How do you feel we've done, or you've done in particular, in terms of engendering the most constructive dialogue with the Muslim community? Is there anything in the statements that you've made beyond just this one word that you wanted to walk back here? Is there anything in the statements that you've made that you feel maybe could be done differently or more effectively in order to create more good in the world in terms of your relating to, communicating with the Muslim population in the world and those who do feel that for whatever reason that you've been unfair to that population? Anything that you want to say to that group?
Yeah, well, I think it's been a long time since I've read The End of Faith, but I'm sure there are passages in The End of Faith. The End of Faith was written right after September 11th. It was just, the ground zero was still just a heap of rubble, smoking rubble when I was writing those passages. And so I would probably, and I was totally insensitive to the prospect of being quoted against myself out of context. I just let it rip at the end of it. And that was, perhaps one of the virtues of the book, but now now seeing the cost of being quoted against myself out of context, I would probably phrase things a little differently without actually changing my fundamental meaning. It's not that there's something that I've said in The End of Faith that I look at it and now think, wow, that's not what I don't believe that anymore. But
some propositions are so dangerous that it may even be ethical to kill people for believing them.
Yes. So that quoted out of context is a shockingly, that's just.
All right, so let's turn it over to.
I just want to answer your final question. So what I am doing now is I'm having a dialogue with a Muslim reformer, Maajid Nawaz, who some of you may know, and who's really fantastic and interesting. And we're going back and forth by email at this point, but we're going to produce a short ebook, hopefully by the end of the year. And the crucial difference with Maajid, though, is that he admits that there's a problem. And he admits that there's a unique problem in the Muslim world now, and that he admits there's a connection between a certain construal of doctrine and the kind of violence and oppression we see in the Muslim world. He doesn't lie about it or obfuscate any of that. And then he's trying to marshal the tools to reform those doctrines. And so that is a distinction between him and somebody like, Glenn Greenwald, who's just out to lunch as a liberal, and Reza Aslan, who pretends to be an expounder of Islam as it is, but just plays hide the ball with the articles of faith wherever as quickly and as dexterously as he can. And so I feel that Maajid is a truly honest interlocutor, and so that's why it seems very fruitful to do this.
Want to go to some questions? Sarah, are we using this microphone? Yeah, all right. So I'm going to call on a few people first, and then we'll go to general audience Q&A. Mary, I want to start with you. You ready? Mary Johnson, former nun under Mother Teresa, now humanist leader, has a great book, The Unquenchable Thirst, about her experience, and next book coming out about being an atheist and humanist, and I wanted to give her a chance to ask a question.
Ask you though, you were a nun under Mother Teresa, and now you're an atheist?
Exactly.
Okay.
I was a nun for 20 years, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity because, you were 19 and you did your thing going off to Nepal. When I was 19, I went to join Mother Teresa, became a nun. We do strange things when we're teenagers sometimes. Those of you who are still young, wait a little bit before you make big life decisions. But, I wanted to tell you that in my process of coming to reason after having lived a life of religious faith for so long, your book was very instrumental for me. A friend of mine put it in my hands when I was I didn't know that there were people who thought that way. I hadn't been surrounded by that. And your book kind of gave me the opportunity to have my reason restored to me. And so I've always been very grateful for that. And if I get a chance, I actually brought a book, my paperback thanks you at the back.
Oh, great. Nice.
But my question, actually, I had several questions that Greg has asked you already. One of them was a lot about the idea, we do these meditative practices. And there are various schools of meditation or whatever, and I've read nearly all of your books and consumed Waking Up, was really waiting for it. But I think there's, the whole guru question was there because I experienced a lot of those things in the convent, these people who are teaching you things for your own good, but they're being very abusive at the same time. That's a real reality. And I guess my biggest questions, though, that haven't been answered yet in your discussion here, have to do with how do we use all of this that we've come to understand through meditation about, what it is that a self is, all the rest of it. How do we use that to go into the world and change the world somehow for the better? There are ways of, each individual gets better somehow, becomes more enlightened, if you want to use those words. For me, it's kind of more, you live in the real world, in reality. But how do we create a society in which those values of reason become more and more predominant? And what can we do in practical ways to make that happen now?
Thank you very much.
Well, I think there are two levels in which that question can be answered. One is the personal, the way in which our own ethical lives and our own freedom from selfishness and neuroticism and everything else that we take into relationship with other people can affect the world. So, if you are, as I wrote a book on lying, for instance, I think lying is if you want to simplify your life and be a better person, like the first whack at it, if you only have one thing you can do, just stop lying to people. And that's the first pass that makes your life much better and the lives of those around you. So, so there's all the things we can do based on ethics and our own insight that can make us better company for others. And I think that has a genuine effect on the world. I see it, when I'm stressed out and haven't been meditating and I'm not getting enough sleep and something has perturbed me and I'm just unhappy, that unhappiness is contagious. My daughters get it, my wife gets it. It's just, I see the effect, and if I don't see it, they tell me. They complain, and it's just not. So I think all of that counts. No one's keeping score, but your life is keeping score for you. You have the life you have largely based on the kind of mind you have, and your relationships are only as good as the mind is involved. But the other level is at the level of institutions and incentives. And I think what we really need to do, and this is probably even more important than all of us figuring out how to be better people on our own, we need to develop systems that make it easier and easier for mediocre people like ourselves to be heroes, to be really good. And we need to make it harder and harder for normal people like ourselves to act like sociopaths. And we have systems where when incentives aren't aligned, you have totally ordinary people who are good people in their lives who make decisions that cause harm for millions based on just a lot of bad incentives. The bankers who just drive the economy off a cliff based on bad incentives. And there's so many situations like that where you just, what is it like to work for a medical insurance company where you are trying to nickel and dime every cancer patient, and the decisions you're making based on your incentives at your job are costing people an immense amount of pain and suffering. These are the kinds of things that you have to be a hero to fix on your own. For you to be the whistleblower, for you to be the person who goes against the structure that you're part of, that requires something really heroic. And what we want are systems that allow for us to be good even by default, essentially.
And this is one of the reasons we're working on building community for the non-religious, is that there's a lot of sociological data that suggests very, very strongly that being a part of a community that is supportive of your attempts to be a better person actually makes you a better person.
Yeah.
So this is a big reason why we're doing what we're doing. You can get involved if you like that idea. Dave Niosi, are you out there? Where are you? All right, come on down. We'll have you do the next one. I see somebody in the aisle there. Christopher Raish, come on down. Melissa as well, and Rick, and then we'll turn it over to the index cards for review. So Dave, you are the former president of the American Humanist Association and of the Secular Coalition for America, two of the largest organizations in the United States representing the non-religious. Local guy, made good, author of Non-Believer Nation and a new book that's coming out soon called Fighting Back the Right. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk to Sam.
Not at all. Thank you, Greg. And thank you, Sam. Thanks for a great conversation and a great book, by the way. I've got it all marked up, which is always a sign of a good book. The question, on the definition of spirituality, which you give in the book, I thought it was interesting. It says, there's no other term with which to discuss the efforts people make through meditation, psychedelics, or other means to fully bring their minds into the present or to induce non-ordinary states of consciousness. And I think that is one definition of spirituality, and perhaps that's one reason why there's some difficulty with the term spirituality, because there are other definitions that people would give to it, as you allude to in the book. But one important takeaway that I took from the book, of many, was that in speaking of spirituality, you say that the value of meditation is not just anecdotal. It's not just based on subjective claims of inner peace, which anyone could claim, but it's shown by objective findings, brain scans and similar tests which show true benefits. So what I wonder is that for many seculars who aren't into meditation, what about other means of achieving what one might call spiritual experience? Some might say, for example, that creative expression is a spiritual experience for them. Music, art, writing, or even intellectual endeavors. Can these be spiritual, and can they bring the same benefits that you refer to in the book? Are there any objective findings? I know you're a brain scientist, and are there any objective findings with regard to these avenues to spirituality? Or are you saying that meditation or perhaps psychedelics are really the only avenue?
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Well, there's an experience that perhaps you've heard spoken about called flow states, which tends to characterize those experiences where we're paying such close attention to whatever it is we're doing that there's a kind of merging with the act. So this often happens in athletics or playing music. You're no longer error correcting. You're no longer thinking about the glitch that just happened or the thing you're intending to do in the next moment. You're just one with the if you're surfing, you have an experience of just being just one with the wave. Or if you're playing the guitar, you're just one with the task of producing that music. And people love this experience. This is why people get addicted to all of these activities. And so, whether it's skiing or scuba diving or whatever it is captivates you, it for the most part captivates you because you have these glimpses or even full immersions in a state that positive psychologists often call flow. Now, that is analogous to certain aspects of meditation, because in meditation you're paying close enough attention to anything, any arbitrary thing, in this case the breath, in such a way that you collapse that distance of subject and object, and you have essentially a flow experience with the most boring object in the world, the breath. And the good thing about meditation, however, is that you can discover that this is just this thing that you love so much in skiing or scuba diving or surfing or music is a property of consciousness that can be contacted directly in whatever the circumstance. And so it is more, there are other aspects of meditation too, but if meditation is better than surfing or whatever it is that gives you your flow experience reliably, it's better because you don't have to run away to the ocean and put on a wetsuit in order to have this experience. And this is an experience you can have in the waiting room of your oncologist's office. This is something that really can be in any moment of your life available to you. And that's the crucial difference. It's not that you can't experience this doing any of these other things, whether it's art, creating art, or once you know how to meditate, then it's continuous potentially with any other thing you do. Then you can have this experience no matter what you're doing. But it is just consciousness. It's just recognizing the way consciousness is when you're not lost in thought.
Christopher Raich is student at Harvard Divinity School. He's the Values and Action intern or fellow at the Humanist Hub, meaning that you are supervising our community service and social justice programs. You have 20 years of intense experience in Buddhist practice, including studying at some of the more prestigious Buddhist institutions in the world. Please.
So, something with the kind of popularization of Buddhism or mindfulness techniques, you said that the goal of spiritual practice is the insight into non-self. And when that kind of wall or membrane of the illusory self breaks down, it sounds like this wonderful at-one-ment. But it reminds me of something one of my teachers, Zen Master Song-san, said, you know, you get enlightenment, you get everything. Like you feel intimately connected to everything. That means Gaza being bombed. That means ISIS. That means biodepletion. That means dying oceans. That means global warming. These are what you feel intimately as your body when you're no longer protecting this membrane of your personal comfort. And the danger with the transplanting of these techniques into an individualist Western context is basically go along with this destructive mechanism of a crazy geopolitical system, a crazy economic system that can't co-inhabit the actual carrying capacity of the globe, of the planet. You can practice these meditations, feel a little bit better, a little bit more content, and continue to contribute to the destruction of life on Earth.
Yeah.
So what do you say to this kind of false consciousness, non-self insight that we have a very high danger of indulging in?
Yeah. Well, again, it comes back to the two levels I talked about in response to her question, that the thing that's going to really move the dial there with these big problems is the institutional level. We have to make changes to, insofar as capitalism is structured in such a way as to be problematic, we have to change capitalism. So, and no amount of meditation or good vibes on our part is going to mitigate the problems of capitalism insofar as they exist. And so that's, you know, it's just two levels to work at. And meditators, you know, Buddhas are not necessarily the best people to solve the institutional problems. Frankly, they probably don't care about them as much as the people who are neurotically suffering the consequences.
Just a follow-up question, like within the Christian tradition, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer had this notion of costly discipleship, where your practice actually makes you much less comfortable because you feel more connected and more caring toward the larger sphere of being. You actually sacrifice your comfort and take a risk to change things. And if there's any corollary with how mindfulness practice can actually strengthen your resolve to enter discomfort rather than just create a bubble of comfort in, let's face it, a largely white privileged community.
Again, I think it's the kinds of problems you're rightly worried about are these systemic problems where you have to be a hero to make any kind of difference, and very otherwise compassionate, normal people wind up collaborating in the destruction of the planet or the destruction of society, or unnecessary wars, whatever it is, because there's just no other way to move. You know, so the only way for me to come to this talk is to get on an airplane and fly here, right? So I'm participating in that system by default. I can't find an alternate way to get here, right? Not a way that's practical. And so, what's wrong with airline travel? What have I just been a part of that I could regret if I looked at the fine print? Well, a lot. But the level of change is going to be somebody, like Elon Musk saying, this is how we should fly planes from now on. We're going to have electric planes. They're going to be, we've got the battery technology. There's going to be no greenhouse gas produced, and that's the level of change that will change that. All the ramifications there. And it's not a matter of each of us being a hero figuring out how to get across the country without producing greenhouse gas.
If you're feeling a little heroic, however, you can join Christopher and myself and the rest of the Humanist Hub community. You can come to the Hub any Sunday at 1:30, where Christopher will be there this semester, this year. We'll be working on programs throughout the year where we, as humanists and non-religious people and allies, are getting together to see if we can put our mindfulness, our values, our spirituality, if you will, to use for the greater good. So thank you. Melissa Choi, come on down. Melissa is she's a student and managing editor of a Facebook group called the Global Secular Humanist Movement, which has just about 300,000 likes or fans these days, and does really interesting work. So you can like that while you, these days we're at Harvard Humanist, if you can like us, if you want to like us on Facebook as well. So thank you, Melissa.
Hi, Dr. Harris. I work with Faisal. I think you've met him before.
Yeah.
The Iraqi activist. He's up there. He came all the way from
Hey, Faisal.
Tuskegee to meet you.
Great work.
So it was clear that on Friday's exchange with Batman that he was highly agitated. You were a beacon of calm and tranquility. If that's anything to go by, then I want what you are selling your book. My question is, how do you see your work contributing to the development of secular spirituality within the context of the wider secular movement? How can you grow and fit this within Project Reason, which you founded, and movements like the Humanist Hub or the Global Secular Movement, which Faisal founded?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's largely a matter of convincing people that this project is important and makes sense within a secular and atheistic context. So the pushback I get from the self-identified atheists for whom skepticism is more or less synonymous with repudiating all of this stuff. There is no baby in the bathwater worth saving. I have to win that debate in order to change their view of things.
But assuming you've won that, because many people have spoken to.
Yeah, I've won it with some people, but there are people who are deeply skeptical. I just use the word spirituality and you've lost them. And so there are people who I've certainly lost. But it's I think it's bigger than secularism. I think it has to keep seeping into the culture. And mindfulness, for instance, the Marines are practicing mindfulness. So it's getting in over the transom or under the door, and I think that's all to the good. And I tend not to want to obviously secularism is incredibly important to me, and I think we need as much as we can get. But in terms of packaging what I talk about, I tend not to want to package it as a secular truth or an atheistic truth. The politics of it, I'm just not the guy. I just don't get so interested in the politics of it. I'm not the guy to think about that. So, I want to be able to say the thing that makes sense. It's really fit for export beyond any club that may already be identified with. And so again, even my criticism of religion, I tend to focus on specific beliefs. So it's not so much about criticizing Christianity as a monolith or Islam as a monolith. I want to be able to talk about, okay, what's the problem? What's impeding embryonic stem cell research? Then you're talking about specific ideas, which it just turns out Islam isn't culpable for. Islam does not have a doctrine that impedes embryonic stem cell research. So Islam is totally off the hook when we're talking about that. Yeah, and so we need that kind of fine-grained analysis. But thank you for what you're doing. You've got more Facebook likes than I do, apparently.
That's Faisal. We'll give him lots and lots of credit for that. Great work. Rick, last one of these. Rick Heller is a journalist and co-founder and co-leader of our Humanist Meditation group. Meets at the Humanist Hub every Tuesday night at 7. Also working on a great project called Seeing the Roses, which is writing up and working on materials to guide people through these sorts of non-religious meditation practices. Rick.
Yes, thank you for opening a space for meditation among atheists. That's great, thank you. And I have a technical question, which you talked about the importance of being aware of thinking when you're thinking, and in the book as well, you say something to the effect that the problem is not thoughts themselves, but the state of thinking without being fully aware we are thinking. I actually try to practice this, so when I have what are called spontaneous inner speech, or if I have ruminative thoughts, I do the practice of noticing I'm thinking, and that can be very helpful. But I've actually tried to practice this while I'm running a computer program, which is what I do for a living, and it doesn't work. It seems to me that when you're doing complex, deliberative thought, you can't really then also, when I try to actually think about the complex, deliberative thought, it just sort of breaks into the train of thinking, and I think working memory can't hold all that, and I just lose my place. So, well, can you really be thinking about complex thought?
Well, it's not thinking about thinking. It's recognizing thought as thought. But I would agree with you that there are certain activities for which a clear awareness of thought as thought may be somewhat destructive of your functioning in the activity. So it's not. And I don't code, but I can imagine coding is not something you don't want to be noticing thoughts and concepts spontaneously arise in consciousness when you're trying to figure out whether this program's going to work. And that's why meditation is different for most people from the rest of their lives, insofar as it is. It's not that you can't have glimpses of what you experience in meditation in the midst of anything else, but it's why it makes sense of the practice of setting aside some period of time to meditate, because if writing code was just as good as meditating, then you could just do your job and you wouldn't have to worry about any of this. And it's the same with my writing books. It's just not, if I felt that my writing was just as good a context for me to recognize these features of my consciousness, then I would never have to meditate. I could just get more work done.
Yes, so what I actually do, I do try to bring metta or loving kindness to the computer when it says there's a problem in the program.
Those are my favorite meditations of yours, by the way. I love when you lead those. Sam, quick question for you that I'll then ask the audience, how you holding up?
Okay.
All right, because normally when we meet on Sundays, for example, we have a strict timeline. We begin at 1:30, we end at 3. If not sooner, and then we hang around for socializing afterwards. This is a bit of a special discussion. We're kind of into your book. We feel there's a lot in here to discuss and chew on. So I would say, do we need to take 30 seconds for those who are sweated it out and need to get going to go, or can we just go into some of the questions from the audience now? All right, go into it. All right, let's do it. You guys have stamina. I appreciate that. Sam, what do we got here?
All right, got some questions. Yeah. What?
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yes, I think I put that over.
yeah. We're gonna get started with Sam. Sam's been collecting questions from the audience, so I don't want to delay Sam.
Sam?
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right.
So,
thank you.
We had a whole bunch of questions. Some of them very silly, some of them very profound. I can only choose a couple, so I'm going to combine these two into one. First question. What's the relationship between waking up and the moral landscape? Is meditation and those states of consciousness just a peak? And meditation is time consuming. It seems like that investing in humanitarian causes is a more effective use of one's time. So how do moral landscape and...
Yeah, so they're really, it's two parts of the same project. The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation were my arguments that our religious doctrines are almost certainly not true and causing harm, largely because they're not true, but also just because they're mutually incompatible and divisive. But then what you encounter in people when you criticize religion are the reasons why they think they need it. And the two principal reasons are their moral lives, so having a rich ethical life and a strong conception of moral truth, and their spiritual life. So the moral landscape was my attempt to answer the moral truth component, and the waking up is my attempt to give a spiritual dimension to reason. There's a connection in that spirituality is connected to our ethical lives in that we really are just talking, in both cases we're talking about well-being. In other words, it's obstacles. And so and ethics is all of the questions that relate to the variables that change in well-being in terms of relationship. If you're in a moral solitude, if you're the only person on a desert island or in the universe, ethics doesn't exist. Then you're just talking about your own personal well-being, and then it really is just a spiritual project in my sense. But the moment you get with other people, and your behavior can affect their states of consciousness, then that whole spectrum of effects is ethics. So it's really not a clear frontier between the two.
Could focusing on one's own spiritual development and personal conscious development lead one to be focusing on oneself at the expense of focusing on other people? And is it sort of another goal is to lose oneself? Is the process of focusing on one's own consciousness, is that in any way conflicting with focusing on others and their wellness?
Well, I guess it could be if in some local instance, or if you're doing it wrong. But I think that the basic fact is that there's no real boundary between being wisely selfish and being selfless. Those are not in tension with one another. But once you discover what you really want is to be surrounded by happy, creative people to collaborate with, and you want to live in a peaceful society, and you don't want to be afraid of strangers. If we're all in this together, then your inclination is to seek to figure out how to collaborate with others in that way. And you want the people closest to you. I mean, obviously we have circles of concern, and you don't care about a distant stranger quite as much as you care about your only child. But you want the people closest to you to be happy. And part of the biggest variable you have in hand to change their happiness is how you are with them. And so that becomes, there's really not two projects there. It's the same project.
Sam, what other clusters of questions do we have from the audience that we haven't gotten to yet?
So it's a unique one, but I think it's really interesting. Are you an advocate of transhumanism, philosophy/movement dedicated to using technology to radically alter human nature, using things like new drugs, gene modification, cybernetics? These changes to allow for even more profound experiences and more even profound happiness that are possible that humans now can't currently experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm a cautious observer of that whole phenomenon. It's obviously hasn't arrived yet, and whether it will, it's I think an open question. And I think there's a strand of transhumanism and expectations of the singularity and AI, all of that, which begins to sound a lot like a tech-focused religion. So there's some of that conversation I find is uninteresting. But there's some very smart people who are spending all their time thinking about it, and I think the prospect of AI emerging at some point where we have to take seriously the fact that we may have conscious computers that are superior to us in every mental capacity that we care about, it's worth taking seriously. That doesn't seem crazy to me to expect. So.
Couple more in there? You want to give us a couple and have Sam work his magic on them?
Sure. I have very vivid dreams that I am sometimes aware of and control. In the dreams, I can, for example, will snow to be there. I would stick out my hand in the snow, and I can swear that my hand is really cold, even though I'm aware that I'm dreaming. What happens that enables me to do this while I'm dreaming, even if it's a lucid dream, but not while I'm awake?
Yeah, that's a good question. Can't really answer that part of it. There's something different about the dream state. Obviously, your frontal lobes are much less online during REM, and lucid dreaming is certainly an interesting phenomenon. But one piece is that the difference between dreaming and our conscious waking life is not as categorical as many people think. To some degree, our conscious waking life is very dreamlike as a matter of neurology. It is just as much happening in your brain as a mere dream is. There's nothing that you're experiencing that isn't that's any less a confection of neurology than a dream where with snow that doesn't exist. So it's a, but yeah, as to the question of why you can, in the context of a lucid dream, create a perfect hallucination, whereas you can't do that in the waking state, I don't actually know. That's a good question.
No questions?
Sarah Chandonnet, how are we doing on time? What do we have time for? 2 more? All right. All right, Faisal. Because of the 300,000 people in your group, we're gonna. But yes, our planted questions were all local, Faisal. But please.
Yeah. Thank you, Barry. Hello, Sam. Good to see you again. I would like to actually update you because I told you about the Young CLE event that I went to about Yale, and Yale atheist group sided with the Muslim student group against Ayan Hirsi Ali, and I did some research about and these people are very well educated, and they made these 3 statements. I want to ask you, how do you make sense of that? They said that women's rights in America are worse than women's rights in the Middle East. That's number 1.
Is the atheist group that?
Yes, one of the blogs of the atheist group, and it's the bad treatment of women in the Middle East are a result of U.S. foreign policy and white privilege and white colonialism. Like, how do you make sense that these people are very well educated Yale students who actually believe this ridiculous nonsense?
They're not hard.
Clearly Yale.
And you have seen, I mean, you encounter a lot, in your more landscape also encountered this woman of the NIH who I think told you about how can we judge the Taliban. I still remember in our book, The More Landscape.
I didn't name her, but...
yeah, but how do you make sense that people who are very well educated, very intellectual, but when it comes to the topic of Islam, they hold completely different standards than if a white person is doing it or a Jewish person is doing it, that's a different standard. But if the crime is committed by a Muslim, it's our fault, and it's white privilege and colonialism. So I want to give you the stage.
Thank you. And then this is, by the way, this is Faisal Saeed Al-Mutar, a refugee from Iraq who became a humanist activist in Iraq and now created this wonderful group on Facebook that we mentioned before. Thank you for your work.
Well, first let me say that someone like yourself is much better placed to do the work of untangling that confusion than I am, because one part of it is just, as you more or less said, white guilt and liberal masochism, which when I try to push back against it, I'm just the privileged bigot who
yes, I think it was back
to privilege. Whereas if you push back against it, if you say, listen, this is what life is like for women in the country I came from, this is what my life was like, this is how quickly I would be killed if I made the noises I'm making now back in the country of my birth. Here are the differences between life at Harvard and life at Yale and life in Mosul. And you have immense credibility having that conversation. I virtually have none, as you can see, based on the kinds of collisions I have with people. But I deputize you to have those conversations.
Catherine, you have one last one from a developmental psych perspective? Catherine Caldwell-Harris, do you? Yeah, you want to do one? Professor of developmental psychology at BU and a member of our community.
He did not plant me, so
or you want to turn it over to Sam for one last question from the audience previously?
What I've really appreciated your whole position about where you are sort of criticizing capitalism here by saying, so as a psychologist, I feel like, do we want to live in a system that holds up greed as a legitimate business motive? And I hear you saying we have a system that allows bankers to drive the economy off the cliff. What's the next step that we can take?
Okay. Good question. It actually connects with...
Sorry to hear you're bored. I said if you were fighting for a
Shut
better
up,
world.
shut up.
All right.
Go away. Go
Thanks very much.
Shut up.
Listen,
Go
All right,
away,
sir,
go away.
Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave.
I find so
Go
many
away, shut up.
Sir,
in your commitment to truth.
all right. Thank you.
It's not making a lot of sense what you're saying, I'm sorry.
There's no inspiration in your moral attitude.
Love you, Sam.
Thank you. So your question actually connects with the question about AI and transhumanism, because I think the reductio ad absurdum of our capitalism and our approach to economics at the moment is that if you imagine the perfect technology, imagine Steve Jobs 30 years from now invents the perfect labor-saving device that saves all the labor, right? So you have a cloud of nanobots that can basically do anything, right? In our current system, we have no way to share that wealth. We have an ethic that questions why we would ever share that wealth. You'd have a multi-trillionaire or a group of multi-trillionaires, and then everyone else would be free to starve. And what we want, the dream of technology, is to eliminate human drudgery. And I think it's quite possible that we could one day have technology that would just cancel all the boring jobs, and everyone would be free to play frisbee and make art and go to Burning Man, or the whole world could become like Burning Man. So we would be, but we can't use that freedom given our system, because we would just have lots of starving people and lots of fantastically wealthy people who would own the patents on this technology. So we have to fix that piece, because we're living with some version of that right now, where you have crazy wealth based on just the accidents of the scalability of certain incredibly useful and captivating devices.
I want to thank.
What do we do?
Well, we need to recognize the ethical unsustainability of our present course. And this has to come. I mean, one way it's going to happen is rich people realizing that they don't want to live in compounds ringed with razor wire, and they want functioning societies where happy people can at the very least, buy their products. So we want happy, well-educated people everywhere, and you don't want so that will erode again why selfishness becomes selflessness functionally. If you really want to be selfish, you realize you want to be surrounded by happy, non-criminal, non-envious, ultimately, people. And a lot of people haven't, particularly the people who read a lot of Ayn Rand, haven't figured that out.
I just want to take a minute, thank our ushers, thank our community moderator, Sam Rosen. Thank you to members of our community for supporting our ability to do events like this. You can come join us, as I said, any Sunday, 1:30 at the Hub. This coming one, I'll be leading a discussion on environmentalism. And then last thank you to Sam Harris, one of the most fascinating Sarah Chenier is the program director of the Humanist Hub, and she is here with a sign-up sheet. If you want to get involved, come down and talk to Sarah. And we'll see the rest of you guys soon, hopefully. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming.